Good afternoon. In today's In the Meantime, I decided to title it The Price of Inequality. And I borrow that title from Joseph Stiglitz's 2012 book of the same name. Stiglitz is a Nobel Prize winning economist who teaches at Columbia University in New York. So this reflection is part of my struggle with the riots going on now and white supremacy that started it. It is horrific. Lots of innocent people are suffering. There is unnecessary violence and unnecessary police force. The last time I smelled tear gas personally was in 1968. But it is a repetition of history, the lack of meaningful progress and the overwhelming violence of the response at every level that troubles me. I suspect there is a much deeper, more fundamental problem than racism and white supremacy. I suspect that present troubles on the news, as distressing as they are a sideshow, distracting everyone's attention from the deeper problem. I suspect that if, as a society, we are able to name the elephant in our national living room, global actually, that we might be able to make progress addressing that challenge. Once we can address the cancer deep within the body politic, we can begin to heal the lesser challenges, of racism, sexism, ageism, ableism, homophobia, and so on. Those are small stuff compared with what we should be thinking about and praying about. It all boils down to money. The individual drive to accumulate more than what one needs comes from a fear of scarcity, fear of not measuring up, a kind of insecurity, fear of other people, and more. Even though modern economies have moved beyond the zero-sum agrarian economy of the past, inequality of wealth is a summation of millions of individual fears. It becomes a social system. It becomes the norm. It becomes self-perpetuating, and it grows until it is undone. And I think it is time to undo it. I'm not making a political argument here. Income inequality is a global challenge that infects all forms of politics and all forms of government. I am old-fashioned in my thinking, but I believe that if you create something of value, then you should be rewarded for it. School teachers create value by educating their students. Doctors create value by treating patients. Scientists create value by creating things never invented. Stiglitz points out in his book that, quote, rent-seeking is the major cause of inequality, with the wealthy, this is a quote from him, the wealthy using their power to shape monopolies, incur favorable treatment by the government, and pay low taxes. The end result is not only morally wrong, according to Stiglitz, but it also hurts the productivity in our economy. Rent-seeking is defined as, quote, seeking to increase one's share of existing wealth without creating new wealth. National decline is one potential result of rent-seeking. In this context, rent is not payment on a lease, but refers to a much earlier understanding of the word as gaining control of land or natural resources. Rent seekers extract money from the public for things that used to be or ought to be free. They add no value to society. Biologists would call them parasites. Business schools call them captains of industry. We need to talk about some serious econometric data, not because I am a geek, but because it is a moral problem that lies at the root of our imminent demise. One class of people that is easy to quantify is a list of Fortune 500 top companies' CEOs. When you compare CEO compensation in 1970 to 2020 and put that in constant 2019 dollars, the ratio of then versus now for CEOs is close to a factor of 30. The average CEO in 2020 makes 30 times more income than he or she did in 1970 when adjusted for inflation. Now I ask you, do you really think CEOs today are producing 30 times more than they did back then? Are they working 30 times as many hours? Yet these same folks who pound their fist on the bar at the country club insisting that people should be paid for an honest day's work, that's how they justify busting unions and holding salary increases down to shameful levels. An honest day's work for them now is 30 times more valuable than doing the same job in 1970, but not for the rest of us. Now, take the workers of those 500 companies and compare their real income in constant dollars in 1970 versus 2020. The answer is that the workers' incomes adjusted for inflation have increased by a whopping 2% in 50 years. 2%. If you believe that people should be rewarded for their productivity, American workers' productivity has increased more than 30% in this same time period, mostly because of automation. But the American worker doesn't get paid a penny more. So the multiplier for CEOs is 30 or 3,000%, while the people who work for them, enabling them to live like feudal lords, have a multiplier of 1.02 or 2%. Would you call these wage comparisons fair and just, or a moral travesty? Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered because he was drawing too much attention to income inequality and white privilege. He was organizing poor people's marches and strikes by sanitation workers in Memphis the day he was shot. Many powerful people violently oppose real justice for everyone because it is the injustice that gives them the power and the unjust income. One social aspect of income inequality is that everyone at all levels of income participate in the system. Everyone wants more money. Everyone envies those who have more. Everyone tries to behave socially like the people on the ladder above them. In participating in this system, people give it power and approval. We give the system names like, quote, the law of the jungle, or, quote, the golden rule, those with the gold rule. But at its root, the system is based on fear. It is morally reprehensible. At least 2 of the 10 commandments prohibit this behavior, and Jesus warned us against it 40 times. The price of our everyone does it approved system of income inequality is not just CEOs and hedge fund managers living in palaces while the rest of us live in shacks. The price of this fear-based system is oppression and evil in the forms of racism, ageism, ableism, sexism, homophobia, and 100 other items and isms. The price of unjust income is that many people will be murdered, held back, forced to attend poor schools, denied opportunities, given tainted water to drink, redlined into ghettos, stopped and frisked, racially profiled, and cheated because they were poor or black or brown or some combination. I'm not arguing that racism and white privilege is not a problem. But we should all take note that while we fight amongst ourselves down here at the bottom of the income mountain, those at the very top take special delight in the chaos. Sure, those at the top may be calling to get tough on looters and for military intervention because they don't want their factories and their businesses burned. But they know, as long as we fight about social problems down here at the bottom of the income mountain, we ignore the real problem. We let the people at the top of the mountain off the hook for accountability. They continue to benefit on a system built on fear that pits people against each other. The prophet Isaiah addressed the people of Israel while they were in exile in Babylon. Figuratively today, 99.99% of the planet lives in exile in Babylon. We live in countries of poor education, poor public infrastructure, poor health care, poor opportunities, poor housing, and poor prospects for our children. Isaiah chapter 40 is often thought of as referring to the coming Messiah, but I'm beginning to think that salvation in this case is not Jesus. Salvation is not a future Messiah coming to us to fix everything. Salvation is us. Jesus tells us, in effect, I gave you all the tools and mercy and blessings you need to do this. The point is, we need to make the rough places plain. We need to get out our shovels and take down the mountain of income inequality. We need to raise up the valleys where the poor people are forced to live shamefully. We need to reach out our hands and invite the 0.01% of the people living at the tops of the mountains to come down from their high places, because if we don't get to work, then we are not living according to God's law and to God's dream. We can do this. But first we need to stop fighting. We need to pick up our shovels and get to work on that mountain. And when we do, God will rejoice.